Hello, let's get into it. So in this video I'm going to talk to you about success. And not success in the general term, but rather how I believe that you should think about setting up your project in order for it to be successful over time. And basically I made a video a while back where I actually showed some concrete tips about, like, at the code level, tools that I use myself then that I have learned through experience are going to help me maintain a good quality code base. And the thing is that a lot of people underestimate the true issues, or rather they overestimate some things and underestimate other things when it comes to software development over time. Because the thing is that most of the time, at least in the beginning, you are going to build things that aren't all that grandiose, things that aren't all that important, and or rather important, I'm not saying not important, but rather they don't require a lot of setup or a lot of complexity in order for you to maintain the project. Like, I have my own little website that I help some people set up, and I mean, I break tons of best practices that I would say I use almost at any like professional project that I work on. And then I do other things that are really great in that project. So you kind of think of it as keeping a clean apartment or a clean house. Sometimes you're really good at remembering to do all the things you need and you take care of stuff, and sometimes you're a slob. At least I am, almost all the time. And the thing is that the same goes for software development over time, because regardless of who you're listening to, be it Martin Fowler, Uncle Bob, or any of your favorite programming profiles, one thing that I hope that me and all these, much smarter men than myself can agree on is that the true challenge of software development is managing complexity over time. Now, that's a very generic thing to say. I'm going to explain, but I think that that's the closest thing to a universal rule that I can give you for software development. Complexity over time is the true challenge, and I think that a lot of our best practices, coding styles, and all, like, there's so much of the IT world that goes into figuring out how to handle complexity over time. Like, I argue that microservices, for example, or that type of, you probably heard the term, it actually springs from the issues and the complexity that came from having a monolithic application. People had issues with how, like, a monolithic application, when it starts out, it starts out like very, sanely enough as a small thing, and you start adding to it, and you add to it, and your company grows, and you add more stuff to it, and you hack some stuff because you have a deadline, and then you have some people who come in, build something, then they leave, take that knowledge with you, and so legacy creates, and it very, very quickly becomes this behemoth system that you have to maintain. And I argue that microservices, and I'm not saying that that's the only reason, but I think a big part of why people got excited about this idea is that it's very attractive, the thought of having a small piece of something that produces a certain amount of functionality. You can easily reason about it, and you can keep your code clean, if that makes sense. Now, some seasoned veterans may actually be smart enough to tell you that, well, microservices and that approach of having a service-oriented architecture, yes, it will make that piece of the system smaller and easier to maintain, but it adds other complexity as well. And the complexity that you get for this splitting of a large monolithic application is that now all of a sudden you move your problem from having a big, massive, complicated chunk of something to having very small, spread out pieces of the same problem, and you get other issues that you didn't maybe you didn't really think about all that much. You have things with, if you're not careful, you may get a slower system because you have several calls that need to be made between each service. You have maintaining, and now you need to maintain, instead of maintaining a single code base, you need to maintain maybe 10 or 100 or even thousands of these services. So the complexity grows in another way. And in order for you to set yourself up for success, I argue, at least when we start out, the first and foremost thing you need to ask yourself is, what is it long term that usually messes like up my project for me? And then you have to make sure that the project itself, and this is where this is the key point to take away from this, you have to just set up your project in such a way that it maintains itself over time, or it adheres to best practices without you or anybody else trying to basically, how do I put this, without humans forcing opinions and thoughts and whatever they have in their head onto the project and adhering to these standards. Now, in my video I talked about the importance of linters, and I talked about how to set up git commit hooks so that you run your unit test whenever you want to push something, how to set up code coverage tools so that you can't push code that isn't tested. All of these different tricks that you kind of learn from experience. And there's so many great videos out on the web, guys, if you want to learn about this stuff that you can use. So I argue that maybe it doesn't make much sense for you to do this on your first project, but you should start to think about it very often, sooner than later, because trust me, there is a massive amount of startups and companies out there which and it usually goes like this. When you first start out, you will need to go fast as you can possibly go, because you don't have a stable platform that people are paying you money for. So speed is paramount, and speed means doing what is necessary, like getting stuff shipped at almost any cost for the most part. And if you're one of those lucky few startups, I think it's 5 in 20 that actually make it to the next stage, and you become a profit, like you can actually get some revenue, or you get investors or something like that, and your company matures to the next stage. Depending on how much of a mess you've made of the system, you may find that you're going to spend a lot of time cleaning things up, or rather your value system is going to change from speed to a little bit of quality and speed. And then that ratio shifts. The more mature your company goes, you will often find that really, really large companies are actually switching that ratio. They're willing to trade speed for quality because they have like a solid foundation. They don't feel that sense of urgency in the same way as smaller companies do. And so what I'm trying to get to with this little video of mine is that if you make these small things, like if you just set up these, as I said, commit hooks and linters and unit testing and so forth at a decent time in your project's life cycle, in the lifetime of your project, you will save so much more later on. I can tell you right now that mistakes that have been ignored, or like good maintenance practices that have been ignored in really large companies in the very beginning, these things cost very little. But as you grow and as the project progresses, the money that is required and the time and investment that is required to solve these problems grows. So trust me, that little hack you did, or that little issue that you have in your code base today, is in the future going to cost you maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, or like whatever your currency is, if you don't address it. And you can so easily avoid these problems by simply having, as I said, this mindset that you need to put up some pillars of quality around your project. And these pillars are linters that make sure that you format your code, automated coverage tools so that you have so that you can't push code that isn't tested, acceptance tests that run through the common flows, like basically the automated tests that simulate an interaction with your application, so that you know, you don't have to sit there manually and click everything, and that way whenever you push something you can know if something broke. And that's really the big ones, in my opinion. Those are the big things to consider when when you have a little bit of money coming into the company. So start doing these things sooner rather than later.